Hello, welcome back to JDA-football. On this episode, we have got no other than a Tiermaker list for you.
Oh,
This is going to be interesting, guys, isn't it?
It's going to be very interesting. Big lineup.
Yep. So we've got Tin Pot, Quiet, Decent, Bitter and Hatred. So we're just going to be ranking all of the English football derbies / rivalries in order, hopefully. There could be some controversial ones. And remember, it is our opinions. So yeah, don't judge us as much. But yeah, leave your comments in below of what you think.
Audio Jungle.
Let's get straight into it. So the first one is Blackburn versus Burnley. What do you think about this one, guys?
so I'd personally go Quiet because I've seen them play once or twice in the past when they were both in the Premier League, which wasn't very often. But yeah, I wouldn't really go Tin Pot because I know it's quite a big derby in like where they are, but both of their fans aren't the best fans in the world, so I'd go Quiet.
All right, what about you, Joe?
I'd go Decent because, they haven't often been in the Premiership or in the same league as each other, but when they are, it's quite a big rivalry, and it's not exactly bitter or anything, but it's a large rivalry in the area, and everyone knows about it.
I would say, and this will be the same for a lot of them, they're not televised, so we don't fully know about them, really, do we?
No.
But
No.
I think Burnley don't really sell their stadium out a great deal. I'm not sure what it's like for Blackburn. I'm not sure if that would change on a derby day, who knows? But for me, I would put them in Quiet, same with Alex, because, well, that's
Yeah,
down
when you think of big derbies, you don't think of Blackburn, Burnley.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So
yeah,
it's a 2v1, so we're going to have to do it. Sorry, Joe.
Quiet.
Just disgraceful,
Again,
disrespectful.
if you disagree with any of our thoughts, then feel free to put them in the comments.
Yeah. The next one is Bristol City versus Bristol Rovers. Start off with you, Joe, this time.
I haven't heard of this, so I'd put it in Quiet because I'm sure it's not a tin pot, but I've never heard of it. I've never heard of the massive rivalry between the two Bristol teams.
Yeah. What about you, Alex?
I think I've heard a lot about Bristol City because I watched a few things off them, and I feel like their fan base is quite big. I haven't really heard of this derby that much. You don't really hear much on the news about it or anything like that. But judging on what Bristol City's fan base is like, I could see this derby being quite good. And again, they are two quite lower league clubs. I think Bristol City are in Championship, is it?
Yeah, and I think Rovers are in League One, I think.
Yeah, and I think because they're slightly smaller teams, I think the fans could have more passion, but you never know. So I'd probably put it in Decent.
So I watched Max on Tour's video, and he went to a Bristol Rovers game, and Bristol City were actually playing on the same night, and the Rovers fans, for the majority of the games, were on the phones checking what the Bristol City score was. So I don't know where I'm going to put this one, to be honest. I might go Quiet. I think I'm going to go Quiet. So you went Quiet, Joe, didn't you?
Yeah, I said Quiet.
Yeah, right. So 2 in Quiet. Right, next game is West Brom versus Wolves. I'll start off with this one. It's not like the biggest Midlands derby, and Joe will agree with me on this one. I think there is sort of a hatred there, but not, of course, the hatred that we're going to. But I think it's a decent for me. What about you?
Yeah, that's definitely the same for me. I think it's nowhere near on the level as some Birmingham derbies, obviously Birmingham, Aston Villa. But I think both sets of fans are quite passionate, and you can definitely see sort of a hatred when they meet. So I'd definitely put it in Decent.
Yeah. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, I'd put it in Decent as well, just because there's a lot of passion in the game, but it's it seems to be quite friendly. Like, none of the fans actually hate each other. It's just quite a friendly derby, to me anyway, compared to other clubs, particularly the likes of the Old Firm and the Birmingham or the Liverpool derbies.
Yeah. You got two very passionate fan bases as well. You got West
Yeah.
Brom and Wolves. So yeah, we'll put them in decent.
But to be
Right.
honest, like any Midland team has a rivalry with any other Midland team. So I know as a Villa fan, when we go to Wolves, we get quite like uppity. Same with West Brom. It's always like quite. There's always that rivalry there.
But not as big as these ones, like your Second City derby and West
No.
Ham. So the next game is Ipswich versus Norwich. Alex, we'll start off with you.
Again, you don't really think of this when you think of derbies. When you think of or some other derbies that were mentioned. Obviously, they're both smaller teams. Now Ipswich have just gone down to League One. It looks like they might be coming back up, and Norwich might be going down to the Championship as well. So we could see them playing again next year.
Yeah.
But again, we're basing it on the fans and all of that. So yeah, again, it's not a derby you think of when you think of all the hatred and bitterness towards the fans. So I think it's going to be quiet, maybe Tin Pot.
I'd put it in Tin Pot because I don't think they've played each other in a long time, and Ipswich is quite a small club. Norwich isn't as small a club as Ipswich, but it's still not huge. They are getting relegated pretty much definitely this season. But yeah, it's been a while since they played each other, so I'm going to put it in Tin Pot.
Well, we all know Jasper the Ipswich fan, don't we?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I spoke to him a couple of times, and he said people slag this derby off, but it's one where you have to go and experience it and see what it's like, because it's not
Yeah.
televised, of course, so we don't know what it's fully like.
Yeah.
I think because I've watched Norwich a couple of times on TV, and it seems dead quiet when you watch their matches, and you don't think any of their fans could be passionate at all. So I hear what he's saying when he says you need to go to the match to experience it.
Yeah. I think there's only that one end really at Norwich where they wave the flags at the start, and that's
Yeah.
it really. I know Ipswich have an end as well. I can't remember what it's fully called, but yeah, I think it's personally Tin Pot as well. So are we all in agree?
Tin Pot, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
The big one.
Just the next game is West Ham versus Millwall, and for me, there's only one for this, and you'll know what it is. What about you two guys?
I would definitely go for hatred on this one. It's just kind of the culture that's in both clubs, and especially outside of both clubs as well. And I think there's so much hatred between the fans. I think it's unrivaled, to be honest, in my opinion.
What about you,
in
Joe?
derbies.
Yeah, I'd agree with Alex. Put it in hatred just because, like,
Sorry.
Millwall and West Ham you're always hearing about them, about how much like chaos happens on the derbies. It's it's a very big derby where they like, I don't know, the smaller Millwall is obviously like not a Premiership team, but yeah, it's a lot of hatred involved in that game just because of the culture.
Yeah.
I remember last season we went Millwall away. Well, I didn't go obviously, but we had Millwall away in the
3-2.
FA Cup, and they started throwing rocks at our bus with which had children on it. So that was always fun.
Yeah, so we're all in agree with that hatred. Next one is Derby County versus Nottingham Forest. What do you think?
I personally don't know a lot about this derby. I know Derby and Nottingham are both they've both got a large following. They're both pretty big teams for the leagues that they're in. I can see it being quite a well-attended game, so I'd put it in decent.
I remember watching this thing. Can't remember what it was, but in the past, I would have definitely gone for this derby as a as bitter. Sorry, and that's because in the past, how like these clubs were 10 times bigger than they are now. Obviously, Nottingham Forest winning Champions Leagues and stuff like that. And if this was 20, 30 years back, I would definitely have gone bitter. But as the clubs haven't really progressed since then, I'd probably put it down to decent. And I feel like because the clubs haven't really gone forward that much, I feel like the fan bases won't have gone forward as much either. So for that reason, I'd definitely put it in decent.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you two guys. I think there is quite a hatred between both sets of fans, but yeah, as you said, the clubs haven't as been good as they used to be. So yeah, I'll put them in decent as well. Right, moving on to the next game, the Merseyside derby, the friendly derby, as Alex said before. We'll start off with you, Alex. Where do you think this one's going to go?
So personally, I'd put it in bitter.
You are
just hear me out, hear me out. So the people who sit together in like the family enclosure and stuff, if we were basing it off of that, you put it quiet, or yeah, basically quiet. And that's just because they live so close to each other, they can't really be a hatred towards each other. But the people who don't live together, they'll practically beat each other up. So I think it kind of equals out between quiet and hatred. So you'll need to put it either. I'd put it in bitter, but you're probably going to put it in decent. So
it'll be interesting to see what Joe says there.
And they call it the friendly derby, but it has had the most red cards in any derby's history. So take of that what you will.
All right, Joe.
So obviously there is a family area. There are people who live very, very close to each other and sort of just get along and they're mates with each other. But on the far ends of Liverpool, there are people that absolutely loathe each other. And obviously on the pitch is different to the fans. So I think part of a derby is the players' attitudes to each other, because you do get rougher games. So when we played Birmingham, it's always rougher on the pitch than when we play anyone else. And that's the same. That's the same for Liverpool Everton. So I'd put it in bitter just because of the players' attitudes and the fans that don't live together. And no, being a United fan, you're gonna be like, oh, put it in quiet. But no, I'd put it in bitter.
Right, personally, I would put it in decent because it's not Sky's big main event derby. It's Everton and nowhere near Liverpool. I mean, Liverpool beat them with the under-21s, basically.
No.
But it's always a rougher game.
That under-21s game wasn't as rough.
Yeah, because they were kids. We're a league or two above Birmingham at all times, but whenever we play them, it's rough.
Yeah, on Derby Day, you never really take the teams into consideration. It's always who wants it more. And at the moment, our team, I don't feel like it wants as much as Liverpool's. And yeah. Also, at Goodison, we never really get beaten. It's always a draw because we've got all of our fans behind them. And also, I find it a bit weird because they normally give us the whole end at Anfield. I don't know what the end's called. But they normally give us the whole end, and now they only give us half of it, and we suddenly start losing. So, could put it down to that. But
right,
yeah.
Well, I'm going to put it decent, but both of you have said bitter, so that's a 2v1. So we'll put it in bitter.
Yes.
Next game is Sunderland versus Newcastle. Is it the Weir Tie Derby? I don't know how you say it. But yeah, North East Derby. Where are you going to put this one?
Personally, I'd put it either in decent or bitter. Because obviously there's obvious hatred between the two sets of fans, but when you think of like all the passion that goes into some of the derbies, such as West Ham, Millwall, I think it's not on the level as some others. So I'd probably go decent or bitter.
Yeah, I'd put it in bitter as well, just because it's not on the same level as your Millwall, West Ham, or as your Old Firm or anything like that.
I say go back 10 years and and Sunderland are playing Newcastle, this would be in hatred because they're both in the Premier League.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, obviously because Sunderland have dropped down to League One, and now it looks like Newcastle are going to get a ton of millionaires coming in and get Mbappe and whatnot. Looks like there's going to be like a bit of an Everton compared to Liverpool gap, maybe not as, but bigger, a lot bigger. Just a comparison. But yeah, all agreeing bitter.
Yeah.
All right, the next game, and this is going to be controversial, is Manchester United versus Manchester City, the Manchester Derby. Right, I'll go last on this one.
No, you can go first. I want to hear your opinion on this.
I'll go first. Right, so many people might say it's the plastic derby, but I personally think you've got your hardcore United fans who go away, so they'll go to the Etihad. The Etihad always, the majority of the time, fills out when the derby happens, which it should do anyway. And Old Trafford always sells out anyway, so that's no problem. And the hardcore City fans go to that as well. So there is a hatred, and it's a bit like Liverpool fans and Everton fans, like you said before, live with each other. That's the same in Manchester because my uncle supports City, but I support United. And then it's like his whole family, my uncle, supported United, and he was the only one who supported City. So there's that divide in family as well. So that's what I personally think. So I'm gonna go. I don't know. I was gonna put it in bitter, or decent. I think over time, as it's coming on now, the top two teams now, not top two teams, but the becoming two top teams now. I think it's going to be 10 years time, 5 years time, bitter. But at the moment, I'm going to put it in decent.
It's a hard one because I know I've seen how good United fans can be, and in big games such as the Manchester Derby would be, they are great sets of fans. But it's just, I think Man City fans in general bring this derby down quite a bit. I think if both sets of fans were like Man United, I'd probably put it in bitter. And it still could be in bitter because there are some City fans that are hardcore.
Yeah.
But it's just like there's nowhere near as much as United. And I feel like that brings it down. So I'll put it in bitter.
But really?
Yeah.
Oh, right. I'm changing mine. I'm putting mine in bitter. What about you, Joe?
Seems like I've been outvoted here. In the past, I would have put it in bitter or decent because when they were closer, like 5 years ago, I'd have put it in bitter. But I do think now, because City is more a money club now. Obviously, United is the checkbook club because they have the most money. But City, I don't know, it doesn't seem like they're riding on a lot of passion at the moment. And obviously United are, but City just haven't got that hatred, it doesn't seem.
Yeah.
Obviously there are the hardcore teams, the hardcore fans that turn up to the derbies, and it does fill out more than it does for a normal match. But that should be expected in a derby. And it doesn't seem like they have quite the rivalries as other teams. So I would personally put it in quiet to decent. But I obviously you guys already voted to bitter.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'll say we'll put it in bitter, but I personally think that it's an up and coming derby. So the history of it's not as big, but there is still some history to it. But I think as the two clubs get bigger and better, it's going to be more of a better derby, and the fans will realise it, hopefully. And then the next one is 43 miles, I think it was, we worked out before. It is the derby between Crystal Palace and Brighton. So go to Joe first on this one.
So this one's a weird one. They're not in the same area. This rivalry is based on them stealing players from each other and their managers having a feud in their 70s. And the rivalry is just carried on. Just because of that reason, I'd put it in decent. It could be a hatred or bitter, but it's not something you hear about because they don't live together. Like, it just seems strange to most football fans that they've got such a rivalry. the fans do hate each other quite a bit, but because they're not up close to each other a lot of the time, you don't like. There's not as much as that of that like rivalry as other teams. So I
Yeah.
put it in decent.
Yeah, personally, I think you're not going to go and so United and City fans, and I'm sure it's the same with Everton and Liverpool and Aston Villa and Birmingham. You're always going to check the opposition team's like score to see what it was like. So if like I don't know, you're going into work the next day, you're going to go up to a Birmingham fan and said, "Oh, you lost 2-0 to Sheffield Wednesday." But I don't think that would really happen between a Brighton and Palace fan, personally, because I don't know why. It's not a local derby, is it? So it makes it hard.
Yeah.
But I don't. The fans, when it comes to Derby Day, I'm sure they'll be class. I think the Palace ones will be better. But for me, not a great history to it. I'm gonna have to put it in Tin Pot.
It's definitely a very weird one. And I can guarantee when Derby Day does come around for these two teams, it will be an electric atmosphere. I know Crystal Palace fans are electric in general, and Brighton fans not so much, but it will be a very good Derby Day. But in general, just because there's not much that can make this a rivalry, I think that takes it down quite a lot. So it's not quiet, as in it's not a quiet derby, but for the tier list, they're probably going quiet for me.
So
Dan, I don't agree with you when you said there's not a lot of history behind it, because it's not a derby built on anything but history. History is the thing that makes it a rivalry.
It's the history that happened to make it a rivalry, because rivalries are normally because of where they are placed as football clubs, but because there's nothing but two people disliking each other that makes the rest of the clubs dislike each other, it's a bit, why is this a derby and all that? So
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah, of course, they've stolen players and managers and whatnot, but you've got no classic managers. Not managers, sorry, matches. So a classic Manchester derby was 4-3 when Michael Owen scored that last-minute goal, minute goal even. There's others like Everton versus Liverpool. Phil Jagielka scores an absolute banger in the top corner, and then you've got a number of other ones like Jack Grealish. Those memorable last year, sorry, those memorable games. But for me, there's no memorable games between Crystal Palace and Brighton.
no.
I would say that's because they're not in the news constantly. They're not in the top league, because obviously we were when the Birmingham fan got onto the pitch, we were up and coming into the Premiership. All of the Liverpool and the Everton games and all the City United games, they've always been known about because they're in the top flight. If these two teams were in the Premiership, I'm sure you'd hear about their rivalry a lot more.
They are.
Huh?
Crystal Palace and Brighton are.
Yeah, but they haven't been for a long time. Like, they're recent.
Yeah. But that's what makes a derby and a rivalry so great, because they've played each other consecutively each season. So that's always the game to look forward to.
But when you think of Brighton and Palace, it's not one you put first on your list.
Yeah.
Fair enough, yeah.
So where do you want to put it? So if I say Tin Pot and
You
Alex says
go-
quiet, where
And I said decent, so let's put it in quiet because it's the middle one.
Yeah. Right, the next game is the second City derby, Aston Villa versus Birmingham. There's no other person to go to other than Joe.
I don't think you can put this in anywhere but hatred. We've had every single game we play against these, there's riot police controlling the fans exiting the stadium and entering. I think it was last season, the season before Jack Grealish got punched. We played them and there was a line of police with shields, making sure all of the Birmingham fans had cleared the area before anyone started leaving from the Villa end. And the Birmingham fans were turning around throwing stones at the police officers, and they waited like 2 miles down the road to catch Villa fans and try and like pick a fight. And that was happening inside of the stadiums. There's always been a ridiculous amount of like bitterness between the two sets of fans, and it's always really rough on pitch. And obviously Jack Grealish got smacked in the back of the head. So personally, I wouldn't say there's any way you can put it but hatred.
Alex,
Yeah.
what would you say?
Yeah, that's the same with me. I don't think it has quite the intensity off the pitch as West Ham and Millwall, but just because it's got so much history and so many big things have happened. Like when you think of Aston Villa and Birmingham, you just think of the big moments such as Grealish being punched, and obviously the games that happened in the 90s, all of the almost like there's so much that's happened, and I think between the Birmingham clubs, like we've got Wolves, West Brom, obviously Aston Villa and Birmingham. I feel like there's no two clubs that have a hatred towards each other as much as them, just because of the history that the two teams have got.
Yeah,
So yeah, definitely hatred.
yeah, I agree with you two on that. I think it should be, when it was in the Championship, it was covered, but not covered in the same way as, like, I don't know, Liverpool versus United would be covered. But I think it deserves to be covered like that. But yeah, I'm going to put it in hatred.
You were saying about the fans checking the score, Dan. I don't know, like, how this is covered in other clubs, but we always, like, no matter what, we've always got the Birmingham score that's announced, no matter what happens, and we'll have updates throughout our match on what's happening in the Birmingham end. And if they're losing, then there's always a huge cheer. There's merchandise shown, like, sold around the pitch, basically slagging off Birmingham, and the majority of our chants, no matter where we are sang about Birmingham, whether we're winning or losing. And yeah, it's just like Birmingham is a big part of Aston Villa just because of, like, what's happened in the past and our history.
Yeah. So the next game is Southampton versus Portsmouth. If you've watched the Copper 90 documentary, you will know about this derby and what hatred has existed and still exists. So, Alex, I'm going to come to you on this one.
I know both of these teams aren't as big as they were. I think Southampton have maintained the level better than Portsmouth, definitely. And in terms of a derby, I'd be tempted to put in bitter, because although the quality of football and the difference between the two teams on the pitch nowadays is not the best, I think, did their last game end 4-0 to Southampton?
Was that in the League Cup? I think it
The
was,
League
yeah.
Cup, yeah. And yeah, so obviously the difference between the two teams on the pitch obviously takes it down a bit for me, but I still think I don't think it's hatred towards each other, but there's definitely a lot of passion shown towards the game between the two fans, and in my opinion, it'd probably go into bitter.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about these two teams against each other. There is a lot of rivalry between them. Obviously, with such a wide gap between the teams, it can't be on quite a level between us and Birmingham being one league, and West Ham and Millwall. But yeah, it has had a large amount of history behind this rivalry, so I'd put it in bitter.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you two there. Got to put it in bitter because I think this has sort of to do with the rivalry. So Portsmouth are their own island, apparently. So Southampton see that as a way to say, oh, well, you're not part of us. So yeah, somehow they've got a rivalry out of that. And it's to do with other things, like they're both two, like, docks. There's docks places. And I think some started to go to Southampton rather than Portsmouth, and that created a whole rivalry as well. And then I think it's like more of the upper class, middle class, more likely to support Southampton, and the working class more likely to support Portsmouth. So then there's that edge of gap as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to put it in bitter as well. Right, the next derby is the Steel City derby. It is Sheffield United versus Sheffield Wednesday. I'm going to start off. Is that all right with this one?
Yeah.
Right. So I think this is one of the most underrated derbies in football at the moment. There is pure hatred between two sets of fans. if you've watched the Football Factory, you'll know about it on Netflix. They really do not like each other. And yeah, for me, this has to go in bitter or hatred. So yeah, that's what I think.
For me, it probably it's same as you. I think this is a very, very underrated derby. Both sets of fans truly despise each other, in my opinion, and I think just the passion of Sheffield United coming to the Premier League and doing so well increases that as well, because Sheffield Wednesday fans will be like, well, that was us about 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like they'll be wanting to push as hard as they can to get onto Sheffield United's level as soon as possible. And I feel like that makes the derby even better. So I'm kind of the same as you. It's between hatred and bitter. I'd probably go bitter though.
I've been in a league with both of these teams at the same time, and part of my family is from Middlesbrough, and they also have a thing for Sheffield Wednesday. Having been in a league with these two teams and being around these two teams, there is a huge amount of rivalry between them. And as Alex said, the gap just widening when Sheffield United came up. That just makes it all the worse for Sheffield Wednesday. Sheffield Wednesday were always a threat when you played them, and they were always a very rough, very passionate team, and their fans were absolutely amazing. So I'd put this in bitter.
Right. Yeah, I'll agree with you there. Put it in bitter. Right, the next game is Manchester United versus Liverpool. Now, this isn't a derby, but it's a rivalry. And I think this is, my personal opinion, this is the most rivalry game you can get in English football, personally. I think you've got the most two successful clubs ever in English football, and the fans hate each other from two separate cities. It's not just about the football, it's about the music and the fashion and other stuff, like the docks between Manchester and Liverpool. Liverpool got angry at the people at Manchester because they opened a dock. This was ages ago, but that's how far the rivalry goes back. So for me, there's no other than hatred. I know you two are going to disagree.
It's a difficult one for me. I agree that between the fans there is pure hatred, and there's so much history in the games as well. Some big games, and some not so happy fans at the end of them led to some big moments in the news as well, and it's always all over the news. Based on the fans and all the culture and everything, I'd probably put it in hatred, but due to the fact that it's not a derby, in terms of the spacing between them, and I know because of this we put Crystal Palace and Brighton down to quiet, which is a bit
yeah, but they're not the most two successful clubs in English football, are they? So it's a little bit different.
But then you could say that about Chelsea and Arsenal. Like, they don't really have that much of a rivalry, although they are both in London. And because they're like the third and fourth most successful clubs in England, if you don't count us in, obviously, they should have a big derby, but they don't, and that's clear to see. You know what? I'll put it in hatred.
Come on, get in. Right. Let's see.
I would have personally gone for bitter.
Ooh.
Only because, yes, they are two cities very close to each other, and they have that clashes of culture, and they have the obviously the docks. There's a big rivalry between the Merseyside docks and the Salford Quays when Salford Quays opened. But I think most of that is in the past now. A lot of that has been forgotten by the generations, because it happened a long time ago in the 60s and 70s and mid 80s. I would say that this is bitter only because the main thing driving it right now is the success of both clubs, and I think it's mostly like, in recent years, it's been more of a cleaner derby than other teams, so I would have put it in bitter.
Right, so it's 2v1. So the Northwest Derby is going in hatred. Right, the next game is Cardiff versus Swansea. I'm going to call it the Wales derby because Newport are nowhere near these two. Alex, since you've got a massive Welsh flag in the background, we'll start with you.
So, obviously, I have quite a close connection to Cardiff, seeing as my granddad supported them. But when you think of loud fans, you don't think of either of these two teams, and that shows during the derby as well. Yeah, they make zero noise at all, and there is sort of hatred between them, but it's nowhere near on the level as most of these teams. So I'd probably put it in Tin Pot.
Obviously, these fans aren't as loud as other clubs, and the fans make the atmosphere for the derby. Personally, I'd put this in Tin Pot only because it's not something you hear about. The fans aren't the best fans in the world. They're not as loud as other teams, and it's not something you hear of in the news. It's not something that everyone's aware of, like being a huge derby, like you're a Millwall and you're at West Ham, or you're the Old Firm. I know the Old Firm is next level, and unfortunately we couldn't have it on this list, but that is where, like, that is the derby, and Swansea and Cardiff are nowhere near this, so I'd put this in Tin Pot.
Yeah,
They're like the other end of the scale.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I don't know if I think it's got a fairly decent amount of coverage with Sky, but yeah, I'm going to stick with you and go with Tin Pot. The next game is Chelsea versus Fulham. I think this is the east side of London. I'm not too sure. But yeah, Joe, do you want to go ahead with this one?
Fulham are they were always rough when we played them, and I am very biased for this because when we played them in Wembley, got beaten 1-0 in a game that we should have won. Honestly, there wasn't a single decision from the ref that went our way, in my opinion. Yeah, I'd say that they'd be a very good team to go see a derby for. Obviously, Chelsea are a bit of a cleaner club, being traditionally in your top six and being like in the main faces of the media. They tend to be quite a clean club, so I'd put this in decent because they are both large clubs with large followings, but Chelsea's quite a clean club.
I would say go back, like this is a theme with a lot of them, go back 10 years and this would have been probably, I would have said decent maybe, because Fulham are in the Championship now, so they're not, I don't know, it seems a bit weird if you put them in bitter, because the fans, I don't think, hate each other that much. And yeah, for me, I would put them in quiet.
Yeah, I think Chelsea have a larger rivalry with some of the more successful teams from London.
Yeah.
Alex?
So, when you think of these two clubs, you don't really think there could be a derby because obviously Chelsea are so much bigger at the moment than Fulham. And the fact that Fulham spent 100 million, was it last season?
Yeah.
And still managed to finish 19th in the league shows you how much of a levels between Chelsea and Fulham. And I feel like until Fulham can get back to sort of a staple in the Premier League, then I feel like this derby's not going to progress at all. And I'm probably going to put it in quiet.
Right. So we're all in agree with quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. The next one is quite a big one. It's the North London derby, Tottenham Hotspur versus Arsenal. Alex, we'll start with you on this one.
It's another hard one because the fans aren't the best, especially the Tottenham fans. It's always quite quiet in their new stadium, and I know that can be hard moving into a new stadium, trying to fill your stadium every week and get the atmosphere back that they did have at White Hart Lane. And I feel like that's the same at Arsenal as well, just moving from Highbury into the Emirates. And yeah, it's just a transformation period for both teams. And I feel like until they can get the atmosphere that they did have at their old stadiums back into their new ones, I feel like again this derby will not progress just like just like Chelsea and Fulham's has. has not. Sorry, and yeah, I feel like until both teams either win something big, not just the FA Cup or the League Cup or anything like that, until they win a major European trophy, which Tottenham were about to until that happened.
Liverpool.
I feel like until one of those two things happen, then this derby will not go forward anytime soon. And I feel like the fans are okay. There is definitely history between the fans, but I feel like them moving to new stadiums and them just not getting the same atmosphere inside the matches, it's just ruined it a tiny bit for me. So I'd put it in decent.
I'd agree. Yeah, we've talked a lot about the lack of progression in some derbies, and I think personally that's the same here. Because they've moved into different stadiums recently in the past few years, that has set them back in terms of their like what they would have been like. Obviously, with teams that have stayed in the same stadium for a long time, it feels like home. And sometimes it's a bit weird moving into another stadium just because it's not the same.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like Arsenal have slipped behind Tottenham quite a bit. Tottenham have focused their sights more on other things, and they have a lot of history, but it hasn't been showing itself in recent years as much as other derbies has. A lot of derbies are sticking to their history, so obviously the old firm. I keep bringing it up because they have a lot of history, and they're finding it really hard to move past that, trying to make it safe. But the history makes the derby, and I feel like a lot of the history between Tottenham and Arsenal has been moved past.
Yeah. I think I'm going to go for bitter on this one because I think the play-in styles and stuff, they're up there with the best because of course, both two top 6 clubs. But there is hatred as well Aubameyang got chucked a banana at him, which shouldn't exist in any type of, not just football, but in society. And I think that just shows the hatred and just how some fans are bad, don't get me wrong. But I think the hatred towards the players is more, you can see it more in that derby than you can in others, maybe. And I think because it's North London and they've got more of a rivalry than somebody like your Palace and Brighton, I think for me it's more of a bitter. So
okay,
you two said
So what
decent.
did Joe put it in? Oh, yeah.
Decent.
Right, so go decent. Right, so that is our Premier League, well not Premier League, football rivalries tier list for England. Remember, it's our opinions, so leave your comments down below of where you think we might have made a mistake in your eyes, and just give us your views. Anything else to add, guys?
Yeah, give us more ideas for Tiermaker lists that we can do. Also, top 10s and stuff we've been thinking about. Just stay active, keep commenting, drop a like, subscribe. Yeah. And also put your opinions down, of course, like Dan said.
Yeah. Make sure to turn the notification bell on and check us out on all the social medias. Spotify, got those 3 podcasts up. So go check them out. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Leave a like if possible. And see you in a bit and stay safe. See ya.